Well, hello. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. My name is Davey. I'm your host. And today I'm joining you, or you're joining me, on set at Refuge Widowers Retreat. Now, if you don't know anything about Refuge Widowers Retreat, it is a ministry that has been started by my dear friend, Daniel Brooker. You guys may recall Daniel and Brittany have shared their story on the Nothing is Wasted podcast, but Daniel came to me about 5, maybe 6 years ago and said, I have a dream of starting a retreat for young widowers who are trying to navigate loss and crisis and grief, and as well as single parenthood. And I said, Daniel, you have my yes, whatever it is, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And so every spring, every fall, we spend time with usually around anywhere from 18 to this time 25 widowers, where we're walking with them through the horrific valley of grief of losing their best friend in the world. And it's been an incredible retreat. I'm taking some time during our free time right now to record a couple of intros for these podcast episodes for you. I got to make sure we get these to our team so that we can get them edited, get them out the door for you to listen to. And so if you recognize a different set, if you're watching this on the YouTube, or maybe even a different microphone, I've got my travel microphone with me, so it just probably sounds a little bit different. So if you're recognizing the difference in that, that's why. For the next couple episodes, I'll be here. But I'm so excited that you're joining us for this week's episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. It's been really encouraging at this retreat to hear from folks, some of these guys that I'm meeting for the first time, but they say, hey, I got turned on to your podcast early on in my healing journey, and it's been so helpful in my healing journey. And I'm grateful for you guys, those of you guys who tune in every single week, those of you guys who are referring the podcast to people, especially those who are going through difficult times, some kind of trauma, tragedy, major life transition. It is making a huge difference. And so thank you for being a faithful listener. Thank you for referring this over to people in your life who you care about. Today, joining me is a very special guest. Her name is Kimberly Haar. And I'm telling you, this story it was shocking to me. I'll be honest with you. In fact, I'll give you a little bit of a precursor. If you have little ones in the car with you right now, this may not be the right time to listen to this. You may want to listen to this while you're on your own, taking a walk with your headphones in the car by yourself, because there's gun violence, there's domestic violence referred to in this episode. And Kimberly's story, not only is her story shocking, but the way that she shows up in this episode it's just incredible. You would never know she has gone through what she's gone through. She was assaulted. Her boyfriend was shot 10 times by her ex-husband. And yet through this episode, you're going to see pervasively the headline she insists on is not victim, but is this: healed and whole. And it comes through her countenance. It comes through her tone. It comes through every word that she says. Her words, it like dripping like honey, is scripture, is hope, is joy. Her story gives you hope that no matter what you've gone through, no matter what you're going through, that you can get through it, and that it doesn't have to plague you. It doesn't have to haunt you. That the worst thing you could ever go through does not have to mark you in such a way that it debilitates you. I'm amazed at Kimberly's faith in this. Kimberly's a licensed professional counselor and marriage and family therapist for 18-year-olds plus. She does not work with kids. She's a speaker. She's an author. She wrote a book called Healing from Life's Deepest Hurts. We'll make sure we put the link in the show notes. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, we'll put it below the YouTube video if you're watching this on YouTube. And I'm going to let her tell her story, but I'm telling you, her story is a story about how the presence of God shows up in the middle of the valley. Some people, I'm amazed at hearing some of these stories of, particularly around assault, which is a moment or a crisis where you would be more inclined to ask the question, where are you, God? Where were you when this happened? Do you not care? Do you not see me? And Kimberly's is a story of God's presence in the middle of that. A slow work of healing, a love story, primarily between a wounded daughter and a faithful father. And I mean father as in the Heavenly Father. You see, she shares a little bit about feeling God's presence in the darkest moment of her life, where she sensed the Lord holding her hand in the middle of terror. And she talks specifically about some scripture that was literally hung on her wall that gave her hope, that was spared by bullets. She told the DA, the district attorney, "I was a victim that day, but I will not be a victim." And that decision right there shaped the rest of her life, shaped her recovery. It's why she's able to show up for others and show up here on this episode with such hope. And she is infusing that hope in you in the middle of her story. We talk about therapy. We talk about different modalities of therapy. We talk about how she walked through all of this. We talk about reconciling the sovereignty of God, the goodness of God, free will, all of those things. Why didn't God stop this? Why didn't he prevent this? And then we talk about how God has been redeeming her story. Now, I'll say this, a couple caveats. If you're currently in danger, your safety is priority one. You need to get skilled professional help. You need to get out of being in danger. You know, there's very well-meaning advice that can be very harmful to you, even in Christian circles. So you need to make sure that you have a right counsel around you, biblical counsel around you, to help you as you're navigating situations that could be threatening or dangerous to you. But I want you to hear her story. I want you to hear just the story of a woman who has a remarkable faith, and she's letting God use the worst scenario that many of us could ever imagine going through, and she's turning it around for good. This is a true pain to purpose story, I'm telling you. Before we dive into my conversation with Kimberly, I want to bring your attention to a couple of things. One, we've had pre-orders for the new Hope in the Valley devotional that has been going on. I'm so grateful, those of you guys who are picking that devotional up. This is a brand new devotional, 42 days through the Psalms. And this is similar to the Pain to Purpose devotional. It's 42 days. However, I didn't write 42 entries for this one. I wrote 6 entries for this one. And then we invited some of the friends of the podcast, friends of the ministry, to jump on and contribute to this devotional. So this is a multiple contributor work. We've got guests like Olivia Feller-Gerber, which you've heard from recently, Daniel and Brittany Brooker, speaking of Refuge Widowers, Brooke Martin, Catherine Fitzgerald, who is our content producer, Lamoris Crawford, Aaron Lee Nelson, Cameron Lee Small, Joanna Denstadt, Ronna Nandeel, Mary Gothi, Aubrey Sampson, Corey Joy, Taylor Carlier, who's our director of operations at Nothing Is Wasted, Ken Roberts, you've heard from quite a bit, Elizabeth Austin, Bob Bankhead, both some of our coaches, my parents, Dave and Brenda Blackburn, Lexi Hunter, which you don't know her, but she works behind the scenes at Nothing Is Wasted. She contributed to this. Vanitha Reisner, Becky Martin, Eric Shoemaker, Misty Coy Snyder, Jesse Wilden, Carissa Sprinkle, Amy Sylvester, Laura Howe, Brooke Talley, another one of our teammates named Bethany Euphema, Dr. Nicole Wilkie. I'm telling you, this is an incredible list of contributors to this, and it's 42 days through the book of Psalms. And it's really going to be encouraging for you, for someone that you know. Pre-order it now. We are going to do our absolute best. We're working really hard behind the scenes to make sure we can get this to you by Christmas so you can give it as Christmas gifts. So get that pre-ordered right now. And really excited to share this with you. And then lastly, my very last 5 steps to taking back your story is coming up in December. We just decided this will be the last time that we do this webinar, the very last time that we do 5 steps to taking back your story. So if you've never been a part of that, you need to jump on for this one. We will be doing some other things in 2026. I'm excited to announce those things as we move into 2026, but this is the last time that we are, for the foreseeable future, hosting 5 steps to taking back your story, no matter what you've gone through. It's been such a rich time, but we feel like there is a new season for what we want to do to serve you in different ways. So we'll be rolling that out in 2026. Join me for the next one, nothingiswasted.com/start here. The next one and the last one, nothingiswasted.com/start here to register for that one. It'll be in December. And I'd really just love to spend some time with you, get to see you face to face, spend some time serving you in real time. Well, Kimberly, it is so great to have you on the Nothing Is Wasted podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
I am more than honored to be here.
You know, you have just released this book called Healing from Life's Deepest Hurts, Reclaiming Your Life After Grief, Loss, or Trauma. And man, have you experienced quite your, I don't know if you can call it fair share by any means, because none of it feels fair, but your share of heartache and grief and trauma. And yet I'm so encouraged by the way that you're helping other people through this professionally. Right now, the message that you're carrying, the hope that you're bringing to people. So before we dive into your story that was kind of the impetus behind a lot of this, let's talk about what you do right now. Tell me a little bit, give me some context for your life right now so our listeners and our viewers can just get a little context for you, and then we can dive into what brought you to this place.
Sure. I have been a licensed professional counselor and a licensed marriage and family therapist for 18 years. And so my normal day-to-day job is seeing my own clients. In fact, you're in my therapy office right now. And
we should just turn this into, maybe we'll just do that. We'll just turn this into a therapy session right now, Kimberly. Lord knows I need quite a bit of that.
So do I. So this is what I do. And then I have begun to travel and speak, especially to women's groups, about how to heal from being stuck in pain. Personally, I am married, and my husband and I, between the two of us, we have 11 adult children. By the time you get in our kids and their spouses and 3 grandkids, and so life is full.
Wow. Well, we often talk about going from pain to purpose, how some of the most painful moments of our lives become a turning point for us. For some people, it turns them inward, makes them run away, turns them bitter. For others, it really, through the crucible of pain, really refines them into just an incredible force for the kingdom of God. That's certainly the case for you, but you have a very hard story that you have endured and walked through before you even got to this place. Can you talk to me about that? Go back and share with us what took place in your life to really bring some of this about.
Right. Well, in 2013, let me start there. I had been married 23 years, and I made the hardest decision of my life, and that was to file for divorce from my first husband. There had been ongoing infidelities. There had not been domestic violence. It had just been repeated betrayals, and I decided that I just couldn't stay in my marriage any longer. And so in 2013, I divorced, but I made the decision to stay single for 4 years because we had 2 children that were still in high school. I wanted to get them out to college, and I didn't want them to feel like they had to compete for the attention of anybody else because I knew that they were going to need mom. So I remained single for 4 years. And in 2017, I woke up and there was just a stirring inside me that said, this is the year you're going to be married again. And I could swear I almost heard the words, buckle your seatbelt. And I just figured, well, that just means it's going to go fast. And at the age of 50, I thought, where do I go to even put myself out there and meet anybody? Because I had only dated one man, for 23 years. And so I decided to become very brave. And I joined 5 dating sites. I thought if one was good, 5 was better.
Double your odds there.
Well,
I guess 5 times your odds.
Well, I kind of credit that to I was raised in Ontario in my summers at a fishing camp. And I learned that if you put 1 line in the water, you have a good chance at catching a fish, but 5 lines is even better. So I got brave. I joined 5 dating sites. And over the period of about 4 months, I had many first dates, and I was about ready to just decide this wasn't for me. And I decided to have my last first date, and it was on April Fool's Day. And I met a man, his name was Andrew, on April Fool's Day. We went out and something inside me said, this is the man. And that wasn't like me. And it also wasn't like him because during those 30 days, he was an engineer. And it tickled me because a few weeks into our dating, he looked at me and he said, I've asked Google how long I need to know somebody before I know I'm in love. And that is definitely the engineer brain. It wants the data, statistics. And so he goes, I want to marry you. And so we both knew. We were in our 50s. We both knew what we wanted. And life was good. And I got a call from my ex-husband, and this had been about 4 weeks since I'd begun dating this man. And he asked me to come over to his home and talk to him about our adult children. This was not uncommon because we had had a friendly divorce. We often talked about our children. And so I didn't think this was going to be any different. But when I went to his home, he started asking me about me giving him an opportunity for us to reconcile. And I made the comment, I said, it's too late. I said, I'm moving forward. I'm serious about somebody. You need to move forward. And he looked at me and he said, well, maybe I'm just going to have to go talk to that man. And I had not talked to him about it. So, all I knew is somehow he found out who I was dating. And I left and I called Andrew and I said, can I stop by your house on my way home? I just want to talk to you for a few minutes. And I wanted to warn him that my ex-husband might, make a nuisance of himself. He might spread a rumor. But I just wanted to tell him about that conversation. And before I left that night, I said, Andrew, would you fight for me? And he said, of course I would. And when I asked him why, he said, because you're worth it. But 24 hours later, it was like within 24 hours, Andrew was not just fighting for me. He was fighting for his own life. Because I went home and I was getting into bed. I was empty nesting, so I was all by myself. And something stirred in me and just said, lock your bedroom door. I had locked my house, every night, but it was not my typical routine to lock my bedroom door. I didn't think much of it. The evening, it kind of unsettled me, but I got up, locked my bedroom door, and I went to sleep. And at 2:30 in the morning, I woke up to my bedroom door crashing down off the hinges. And my ex-husband had broken into my home. He was intoxicated, and he had a gun in his hand. And for the next 4 hours, I was assaulted. After that period of time, he told me as punishment for ruining his life, he was going to kidnap me and make me watch him murder the man I had just started dating. And so I went with him at gunpoint in his vehicle. And, the whole way there, I was just praying for protection for Andrew. I was praying he'd go to work early because by this time it was about 6:30 in the morning. And when we arrived at Andrew's house, my ex-husband looked over at me and he said, now you can go do what you need to do. And he left the keys in the ignition of the vehicle. He reached in the back seat, he got the bullets, he got his gun, and I watched as he climbed the first 3 steps to Andrew's front door, and there was a lead glass window that was in his front door, and I heard 3 gunshots, and I knew there was no way Andrew was going to survive this. So I made an escape to a super center where 911 was called. I was ushered into the warehouse, waiting for the police and ambulance to come get me. And I would later learn that Andrew had been shot 10 times.
Oh, my goodness. Oof. Kimberly, it's like nearly impossible as we sit here and listen to this to metabolize it inside of our own hearts. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine what it was like in that situation. And the weeks and months following that situation. There are people who are listening to this and watching this, and they've experienced some horrifying situations similar to this, assault and abuse, and they have trouble metabolizing their own.
Yeah.
In those moments, what was going on? Like as you're, of course, there's, I'm sure, lots of shock, lots of disassociation, but what were you feeling and experiencing as you're watching all of this play out in front of you?
Yeah. When it first began, rather than dissociation, I think my therapist training kind of kicked in because I told myself from the very beginning, stay alert, listen to every word he says. You need to keep yourself safe. So, and I actually, when my ex-husband broke into my home, the very first thing he told me is that he had come from killing my mother and father. Now, he had not, but I didn't know that. And so in those moments, I told myself, I said, okay, put that on the shelf. You can grieve it later, because if it's happened, there's nothing you can do right now. And so I made the decision not even to let my mind go there. And I just, under my breath, I prayed and I asked, I said, Lord, keep me alive, because my kids are going to need me. My family is going to need me. And I stayed very alert the whole time. All I can say, it was like a gift of logic, or a gift of, it doesn't mean I wasn't afraid, but I kept that logic online and was kind of trying to stay one step ahead of what was going on. Yet it all seemed like a very bad dream I wasn't waking up from. And when I got to the emergency room, of course, that's when I was able to say, okay, I am safe here. Now all the emotions started to flood, the adrenaline from the last few hours. And really the most important thing I wanted to know was what had happened to Andrew. And I had met one of his adult children. He had 3 adult children. I had met one, and his son called my cell phone, my adult daughter, she had come to the emergency room and she had my cell phone. And so his son talked to my daughter, and he said, listen, we are so sorry that this has happened to both of our parents, but we really feel like they need to go their separate ways. Because, I mean, they just thought this is some crazy lady our dad's gotten involved with a crazy ex-husband. And so at that point, my heart really sank, because I knew this was the man I was going to marry. And I was like, God, have you been dangling a carrot in front of my face? Here, I've gone through all this heartache with a divorce and betrayal, and I finally feel like I'm happy just to have it taken away again. And so I went home from the emergency room. I couldn't find Andrew because he was under an assumed name in the hospital because it was a crime scene. And, I had some people, I'm like, hey, check the hospital, see if we can find him, because I just wanted to talk to him and explain that I had not been a part of this. And I went home to my mom and dad's house, but I knew I couldn't stay there indefinitely. And my uncle and aunt lived in town, and they had a beautiful big home in the south part of our town, and they were leaving for Canada for the summer. And they said, Kim, we want you to have our house for the summer. And so I went over to their home, and they were giving me a tour of their home. And when I saw their backyard, there was a big, beautiful pergola in the backyard with big beams and 2 swings and a huge cement floor. And something inside me, I felt like the story of Moses, when it talks about Moses saw the burning bush and he took off his sandals because it was holy ground. And something inside me, I knew that this was the place, this outdoor area was going to be my holy ground, where I was going to spend time with Jesus. And I didn't know how I was going to heal, but I knew that that's where I was going to begin my healing. And so that's kind of the beginning of, I would not hear from Andrew for another 4 to 6 weeks. And during that, there was just a lot of grieving, a lot of layer by layer beginning of healing. And so that's kind of where that healing began.
Wow. So at the time, you knew that Andrew had pulled through all of this, but you were under the assumption now that as he had pulled through, he was now going to cut ties from you.
That's
and there was
right.
not going to be any interaction anymore.
That's right. I knew that he was in critical condition for a very long time. And I think it was like 10 to 13 surgeries that he ended up having. And I knew I had contact with his assistant from work that I had met one time. And I called her and I said, tell me what's going on. And she said, the first few days, Andrew said he loved you and he wanted to be with you. She goes, but by the end of the week, he agreed and he thought you guys should just go your separate ways. So as far as I was concerned, it was over.
Wow. Kimberly, you as a marriage and family therapist, you see a lot of people in your office. You're talking with people about some very difficult things. You're kind of getting underneath a lot of emotions involved in those very difficult things. We had a lot of people who said that when they heard about what happened to us and what happened to my late wife, that it struck a whole lot of fear, especially for women. That's one of their greatest fears. Them being alone in their home and their home being broken into and feeling like they're just don't have the ability to protect themselves. And you've experienced what many people would say is one of their greatest fears. There are also a lot of folks that we work with right now in our ministry who they're in very difficult marriages. They're trying to figure out that decision of, do I lean in and stay? Do I walk away? You know, there's a lot of nuance within that. How do you help, you know, as you share your story, I'm sure it comes with a lot of that same kind of, wow, that's my greatest fear. I can't imagine doing this. How do you help people who, as they're listening to this right now, they're going, oh, that's why I shouldn't make this decision to, even though I need to walk away, I shouldn't make this. Or where they start to let the fear reel begin to play out. How do you help them sort through that? That's been a difficult thing for me. I almost feel like, people, when I share my story, they go, oh my gosh. And then they're paralyzed by fear, because this is like, that's the last thing I want you to be, is paralyzed by fear.
Right.
How do you help people untangle that?
You know, I think that the first thing is, when you talk about people that are trying to decide, do I go, do I stay? I always say the very first thing in making decisions like that is get somebody that is trained and skilled and professional to hear your specific circumstances and give you good counsel, good godly counsel, but good counsel. Because, I had many people that were well-meaning that had told me through the years with my ex-husband, you need to forgive, you need to stay, you need to believe God to restore, you need to believe God to restore. And, I can't say I stayed in my marriage too long because what's done is done, and my life would have been different had I made different choices. Yeah. But I think it's really important to recognize that well-meaning people are trying to help, but they can give really bad counsel. And so get somebody that is very knowledgeable and skilled. And, the fear that people can have is, I didn't have the fear that this would happen, and there was no inclination that it would, because, like I said, it had not been a domestically violent marriage throughout our marriage where I was scared of being physically abused or hurt. When it happened, though, in the beginning, I was very scared as I was walking through this, but I often get asked the question, where's God when bad things happen? And, my answer is he's there. He's there. And sometimes we ask it more as an accusation, like, God, you weren't there. But in the midst of the scariest thing in my life that had happened, all of a sudden I was laying on my bed and I was scared. I didn't know if I would live or die. But all of a sudden I sensed a presence in the room. And it was a sad presence, but it felt like I knew this presence, and this calm washed over me. And all of a sudden it was almost like I knew it was the Lord's presence. And it was like he was reaching down and holding my hand. And it was like he was saying, I am not letting you walk through this by yourself. I am right here. I am going through this with you. And in that fear, it's normal when something scary happens. It's normal. Our brain is trying to protect us. It gets hypervigilant. We scan the environment. We do the what ifs. And there's a part of learning to calm our nervous systems and be able to not just take those thoughts and let them spiral. Because, the devil wants us to walk in fear. The devil wants us to walk in fear. And he will make sure that he feeds us those lies of fear and the what ifs and what coulds and what mays. And in those moments, it's really being able to partner, one, with the Word of God, to do everything in our power that says, you know what, I'm going to do everything I can to keep me safe. Because even my ex-husband was apprehended and went to jail, but I was still scared for my safety, even though I knew he was in jail. So there was the imminent threat was gone, but my body and my brain was still on high alert trying to protect me. And so that's a part of being able to learn how to calm my brain and my heart. And I put myself in therapy almost right away, because I knew that God is the healer, but therapy is a tool that God can use. And so I right away got good, trusted friends around me. I put myself in therapy, and it was a walking out process. It doesn't just go away like that.
Right. How would you, let me just kind of like double click on this just a little bit more before we kind of move on. You've mentioned a couple of really great things that I want to also talk about, but especially in a domestic violence situation and an abuse situation, and one of the things as we're coaching people, working with people, one of the predominant questions I hear is, why didn't God prevent this?
Yeah.
You're kind of asking this question of like, I mean, you've resolved for us, hey, you felt protected by God's presence in the moment.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the next thing that people go to is like, okay, were you not there, God? Were you not, okay, well, if he was there, why did he not stop it if he's good?
That's right.
And I know that's a big question, but I'm curious in your own experience, how have you settled that question?
Yeah. I have, in the very beginning, I was very angry with God and I felt abandoned. And I was like, God, okay. In fact, I even told him, hey, I have lived for you all my life. I've done this. I followed your word. Why didn't I kept my end of the bargain? And of course, we know that God is not a bargain God. But I'm like, I have done what I'm supposed to. Why didn't you? And, there's no cookie cutter answer, but we do live in a world where there's free will. And I don't believe that God goes in and changes free will. And so in those moments, my ex-husband had free will. And so for me, I had to come to the resolution of, you know what, I don't understand. Although the Bible is full of scriptures that say we're going to go through afflictions. It says when you look at the things that happened to the apostles and the disciples and it's like they went through really hard things and God loved them. God was there. Sometimes we're just not going to understand until we get to heaven. But it is, I would say the biggest thing is my ex-husband had free will that day. For me, God was there beside me. And I like to use, when I was asking and just really wrestling with that question, I thought of just kind of a word picture of when one of my children, my middle daughter, when I took her to, I was getting ready to take her to kindergarten and I was getting her immunizations. And she looked at me with his big crocodile tears. And it was like, Mom, why are you letting them do this to me? Why don't you stop this? And I remember looking at her and saying, look into my eyes. I am not going anywhere. Hold my hand. Mommy is here. And I was squeezing her hand as tight as I could. And I loved her. It didn't mean I didn't love her. But I think that God says, look into my eyes. There's nothing you're going to go through that I'm not there. Psalm 23 says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll be with you. It doesn't necessarily say I'm going to take you out of it. It just says I'm going to walk through it and you're not alone and you will get through it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, we often want God to step in and intervene to prevent things from happening, of course, and sometimes he does. I think there are multiple times where we're not going to see it until we see kind of the reel of our life play over again in heaven, right? Where he pulls back the veil and shows us, hey, let me show you all these times I was protecting you, but he always does step in to intervene to produce something good out of it. Something really neat that happened, though. It was 2 days after my assault. And I was at my parents' house and a woman from work called, or she texted me at 11:30 at night. She was an acquaintance, a friend, but she had never been in my home. And she just expressed some sadness. And I'm so sorry you went through this. And she goes, but I just have this scripture that keeps going over and over and over in my mind. And I'm supposed to share it with you. I just really feel I'm supposed to share it with you. And it was the scripture that said that be still. All we have to do is be still, that God is the one that fights our battles for us. And she didn't realize that in my bedroom, on the wall, I had that exact scripture. It was like a long rectangular scripture all over my wall. And the day I was assaulted, bullets hit above that sign, bullets hit below that sign. Nothing hit that picture. And it was the exact scripture she gave me 2 days later saying, I just really feel like the Lord wants me to tell you this, that the Lord will fight your battles. All you need to do is be still.
And so it was like little things like that over and over again. It was sometimes we get mad or we say God's not showing up, but I think he's not showing up the way we expect him to. We get frustrated because we say, God, you're not there, but we're telling him how he should show up, what he should do, how he should do it. And, God showed up in so many ways with my family and friends that surrounded me, with favor, with appointments, with finances, there were so many ways God's hand was there. And it's like when Jacob wrestled with the angel. The next morning, he said, surely the presence of the Lord was in this place, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that we can approach things and go, God, this is going to be evidence of you showing up. Or we can say, hey, God, my eyes are open. I want to see. I want to be aware of how you're showing up.
That's right.
And God's so personal with the way he shows up. So he doesn't, Jesus didn't carbon copy miracles.
Right.
The way he healed a blind person one way was not the same way as the next time, right? And so each of our own stories, they're not going to be carbon copies. We can't go, hey, the way that God showed up for Kimberly, he's got to show up for me in the same way. It's no. Hey, God, let me be open to how you're showing up for me in this situation, because that's the personal nature of our transcendent God. He is very personal. Kimberly, you said that your healing journey really began then a few weeks following, where you have this time of respite, where you have this time to step in. You also talked about therapy being a really important part. I'd like to take this in kind of two parts. First of all, you were a therapist at the time. Why did you feel like that you needed to, instead of just applying the principles to yourself, that you needed to put yourself underneath the expertise of a therapist, even as a therapist yourself? What did that do for you?
Sure. It's kind of like asking a doctor why he may go to a doctor.
Yeah, you would think so, but many people are like, I got this. I can do this because I've got the training.
Right. Now, I did do many of the things that I've walked my clients through, but I knew a therapist doesn't heal you. But I wanted somebody to walk beside me to make sure I was continuing to heal. That kept me going. I needed somebody to just walk the journey with me. So I wasn't looking to them to fix anything, because you can't. It was, that healing journey in the very beginning, the first few days, I was so numb and angry and every emotion you can think of. And I was laying on the cement floor of that patio by the pergola. I was in a green robe wrapped in a robe wrapped in a green blanket. And I prayed and I said, God, I don't have words to even talk to you. I have never felt this empty and this broken. I feel like I am a shell of a person. And I said, but I know there's a scripture that says that you sing over us in Zephaniah. And I said, I'm asking you, would you sing life into my body, because I don't feel life. And that was the beginning of, I would put praise and worship music on, and I let that become my prayer. I let that wash over me. And little by little, I would just talk to the Lord. I would meet him. I would tell him I was angry, and he didn't reprove me. He accepted, God isn't mad if we're mad. And he loved me. And in the beginning, I tried to tell God, this is what you need to do, how you need to do it, when you need to do it. And it would make a great testimony. And I would say, and Lord, I trust you. And then I'd call my friends and I'd say, this is how you need to pray, when you need to pray. Everybody pray. Andrew has a Kim-shaped hole in his heart. And I was trying to convince myself, I'm trusting God, but I wasn't. And I finally got honest with the Lord and myself. And I said, God, I'm scared to trust you with my dreams and my future and my today, because what if you don't do things the way I want them? And I said, but Lord, I am going to choose and make a choice. The Bible's full of scriptures that say, choose you this day, choose life and death, choose. We have options to choose. And I said, I don't feel like surrendering and trusting, but I'm going to choose to. And I said, Lord, and if you don't give me what I want, I'm an honest prayer. I said, Lord, I'm probably going to complain. I'm probably going to whine and kind of mope around. I said, but Lord, I'm going to choose to trust you no matter what my future brings. And so there was layers upon layers of grieving, and forgiveness was a big part of it. I had to begin to really look at, I don't want to be angry and resentful. I don't want to be bitter. So how do I begin the journey of forgiveness? And, at the end of 6 weeks, I was sitting at the pergola and I got a Facebook Messenger message on my phone because Andrew's kids had taken my phone number out of his phone. And it was from Andrew. And it said, "Hey, I'm alive." And I mean, what do you say to that? And I was like, yay. And I said, "Can I come see you?" And he said, "No." He goes, "I'm getting ready to go in for another surgery. My wounds are infected." And he goes, "I'll contact you after surgery." And he said, "Take care." And I thought, what does take care mean? Does that mean go on with your life? And I didn't know if I'd hear from him again, but I waited. And a few days later, I got another message and it said a visit would be nice. And so here, I'm 50 at the time, he's 53, and we are sneaking around his adult children at the hospital so they don't see me coming to see him. And I walked in his hospital room and I saw him all bandaged up. And I said, "Andrew, where does this leave us?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "I've read the felony counts." He goes, "I know what happened to you and you're really going to be messed up." And he goes, "I know what happened to me and I'm going to be messed up." And something came over me and I shook my finger in his face and I said, "Andrew Haar, you will never meet another woman like me." And 4 weeks later, we were engaged, and 4 months later, we were married, and we have now been married 8 years. But it was I will say, had Andrew never come back, though, I knew I was going to be okay because he wasn't my answer. He wasn't. And even I had my pastor's wife, I went out for coffee with her. And I said, "This is what you need to pray, how you need to pray." And she said, "Kim, you're making Andrew your idol." She goes, only Jesus is supposed to fill that in you. Jesus is supposed to be your everything and fill that happiness. And if Andrew comes back, great. But if not, you've got to find that in the Lord. And it really, it stuck to me. First, it offended me, but I knew it was true. And so towards the end, I was thrilled Andrew came back to me. But if he hadn't, I would have been okay. And I knew that life would have been good because it was going that way.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, I think a lot of people begin to, they hear stories of the start, the middle, and the finish, and they kind of they would deem, when you and Andrew got together, I don't know if it's because we're informed by Hollywood or what it is, right? But that's redemption. Now, all of a sudden, our theology is conflating with Hollywood. We're going, that's redemption. There it is. And that's not the case. Redemption for you really began when you started letting the Lord put back the pieces in your own heart, where you were becoming whole, and you're choosing then to help other people through this.
People think that my story includes this wonderful love story, and it does, but it's not the one with me and Andrew. It's the one with me and the Lord. And it was such a beautiful healing time. But there was, I use the words you have to choose in healing because, there's a story in the Bible of Naomi. She's a woman and her husband. They have 2 sons and they leave Bethlehem and go to a foreign land. And they raise their sons. The sons get married. But through those years, Naomi's husband dies and both of her sons die. And when they go back to Bethlehem, she takes one of her daughter-in-laws back with her to Bethlehem, and Naomi is greeted by the women. They're excited, and they say, "Naomi is here." And Naomi makes a comment. She says, "Don't call me Naomi anymore because God brought me out full, but he's afflicted me." So she blames God, and she says, "And he's brought me back empty, so from now on my name will be Mara," which means bitter. And Naomi changed her name to her circumstances in the past and thought her life was over at that point. And now that was in her grief, and we know her life did move forward. But when God changes names, when he changed names in the Bible, it was to the future, and it was to the promise. And when I was going through those first few weeks after my assault, I would have to go to the Victim Witness Center at the county courthouse because there was a crime and they were getting me ready to have to testify. And I would always have to sign in on this piece of paper that had a red arrow that said, "Victim, sign here." And every time I signed that, something inside me, there was like an anger inside of me. And I told the district attorney, I said, I have to tell you something. I was a victim that day, but I will not be a victim. That will not be what I'm known for. I was victimized. This wasn't fair. It doesn't mean I'm just healed, but that's not going to be the end of my story. And even in choosing to tell my story, it was a really difficult decision because, one, I am a therapist. I hold everybody else's stories and I walk other people through, but I don't go and just tell my story. And so I decided that I was going to pull back the curtain for a couple reasons. One is I wanted to be that person that could say, I get it, me too. It's like life is hard for all of us and we all go through things, but I wanted to be an example to say, but you know what? God heals. The other reason is the day the assault happened, it was all over the news and I had no power in what people knew about my story. All they knew is woman's assaulted, boyfriend is shot, and that was the end of the story. And I wanted to take the power out of that. I didn't want the devil to have the last word. And I wanted my real story to be, yes, woman was hurt and assaulted, man shot. But here was a woman that was hurt. But the real story is she ran to Jesus and she got healing. And that was why I decided to really, it wasn't dropping a mask. It was pulling back the curtain and it was saying, okay, I'm going to use my personal story as Kim the woman, not just Kim the therapist. And I believe that that's really where the Lord is using that. You know, like you said, when you share your story, it's you share it and it brings freedom and healing. And it's like the devil's not going to have the last word of my story.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I love this approach, Kim. I love that you're partnering with God to take back your story. The enemy has tried to steal it. He's robbed all kinds of quote unquote spiritual territory from you, or at least tried to. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus has come that we have life and have it to the full. And that's not predicated on whether or not we have great circumstances. He means we're going to have life to the full no matter what we go through. I love the story of Ruth too, because you brought up how Naomi changed her name to Mara. So she grew bitter toward God, bitter in her circumstances. Ruth's name means friend. Yeah. She chose a different route. Yeah. She decided to befriend God, to just say, hey, God, I'm assuming to look, I'm going to look at my circumstances through, I'm a friend of God. What is he up to? Right. What is he doing to redeem and restore? Orpah, who is Ruth's sister, her name means the nape or the back of the neck, which in her story, she actually turned her back on God. She walked away. She did not go to, to the back to the promised land, right? She went back to Moab. And so you have these three different reactions from three different widows, essentially. And we all get the choice. We're at a critical juncture in all of our circumstances. And I love that you're saying, hey, healing is a choice. Yes, I can be victimized, but I'm not going to live as a victim. How do you in your therapy practice, especially now with what you've experienced? I mean, you have, especially working with women who have been victimized, or you have the ultimate, we call it street cred. I know that sounds kind of like it, but you have, I mean, you're able to look them in the eye with this authority that says, I have been there. Yeah. Let me tell you how to get through this. You don't have to be a victim. What are the steps that you help women specifically in this situation take when it comes to untangling this, healing from this, processing through it, metabolizing it, all of those things? Well, and let me say this, it's not just women that have been like gone through domestic violence and abuse. And I like to say there's no pain Olympics. Pain is pain. And somebody that has gone through something that's really impacted them hard can feel those same emotions. And the process is really partly the same. And so some of that is, I don't just tell them the steps. I say, let me walk with you. It's the same thing I needed. Let me walk beside you. It's going to be, you have to do the work. You have to, and some of it is really facing, what is it that I lost? What is it, where's the grieving part of it? And a lot of times it's walking through, helping people walk through forgiving other people.
The day I was assaulted, two big things happened. Well, lots of big things happened, but the day I was assaulted, my ex-husband, the intoxication was wearing off before he kidnapped me and took me to Andrew's house. I'd been assaulted, and the intoxication was wearing off, and he looked down at me, and he said, "Tell me the truth. I've gone too far." He said, "You could never forgive me." Because our marriage had been marked by me forgiving him. And I looked at him, I stopped for a moment and I thought, because I didn't want to just placate him, but I looked at him and my face was unrecognizable. I mean, I had been, beaten and I looked at him though, and I said, "You're right. You have gone too far. There's no going back." I said, "But I want to tell you this day I will forgive you." And I declared that over myself because I knew I was going to do whatever it took to work through my healing, because I would be healed. I would not be unforgiving. I would not be bitter, because when we stay attached to those negative emotions, anger is good when it tells you I'm not okay with something. But when I hold that and it turns to resentment and bitterness and my brain has to remember what happened, it becomes like an umbilical cord between you and somebody else. With a baby, an umbilical cord is meant to bring life and nutrition and nutrients and good things. Anger and resentment is like that umbilical cord, and it sucks the life out of you, and it robs you, and it ultimately kills you on the inside. And so that day I made a choice. I was going to do whatever it took to forgive him. And that night, though it was a process of forgiving, that very night as I went to bed, I prayed for my ex-husband. I prayed he wouldn't be scared in jail. I prayed that he would sense the angels around him protecting him. And I was still angry. I wanted him there, but it was not where I was just wanting punishment. And now the next day there was more anger, and forgiveness was a process. But my daughter also asked me later, she goes, "Mom, do you remember what you told me in the emergency room that day?" And I said, "No." She goes, "Mom, you told me, promise me you won't let this make you bitter." And so there was an awareness of even then it doesn't mean we're healed, we forgive all in one day, and it's a neat little bow in a package. But there's just the decision that we get to make that however long it takes, we're going to keep working this until we're actually on the other side of those things.
Wow. Kim, one more question. If you'll take the time with us, these kinds of traumatic moments, very, very, very traumatic moments, they tend to, there's residue, or that our body hangs on to, stores these things, right? The work of Dr. Basil Vander Kolk, Body Keeps the Score. It's become a lot more in vogue for people to understand this and realize this. That's just the first step, is just understanding that our body keeps the score. How do you actually, when you begin to experience some of those involuntary moments of feeling unsafe, even if you're in a safe situation, you have that PTSD, if you will, reaction, what do you do with that? How do you begin to dispel that, or begin to, what does that look like for you? That is a process, in that the PTSD, your body holds memories, and it holds reactions. And, I think the very first things, especially in the beginning, it's recognizing, because in pain and trauma, your body does want to dissociate. And so it's like the head gets cut off from the body. So we're not feeling anything because we don't want to feel it. And so the very first thing is learning what is my body feeling? So I'm labeling, okay, you know what? That's fear. That's, that's anxiety. That's overwhelm. So it's actually first becoming very aware. What is it that I'm feeling, and where am I feeling it? What are my thoughts? And some of it aren't even connected to the conscious thoughts, because there still is. It's been 8 years for me, and there are still some involuntary reactions that my body will do. We just went through a holiday where there's lots of pops and with the 4th of July and the sounds. And, I was actually surprised. I was sitting outside and just little sounds. And it was like I was not fearful.
It was not I wasn't scared, but my body would jerk and it would jump and it would. And so there's a process of healing the body, and that takes time. There are great therapies, that are specific for trauma. There's somatic therapies. There is EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing that can address, if I have a belief that I'm not safe, it may be, how do I walk through where I can let my brain know I'm actually on the other side of that and I am now safe. So you can begin working on that. But PTSD and your body does hold that. And it is something that, it's a continual process. I continue with that process in my body. Now, I don't have that fear response, but my body does. It will be easily startled. It will, if I go outside, my brain goes, I check my surroundings. And so I'm more cautious. And so some of that comes with the territory.
Yeah. Yeah. As we close, your husband now, Andrew, he said, I don't know if we can do this. You're messed up. You're going to be messed up. I'm messed up. That was, 8 years ago, the label he was putting over your relationship together. How would you rewrite that now? What does that look like now? Because he's not wrong in the sense that you're both coming in with a whole lot of memories, baggage, trauma, all of this stuff. But now, what is that? How does that look like as you're bringing those two things together? Yeah.
Well, when he told me that, he obviously didn't know the power of words. And I remember telling him, I said, okay, Andrew, I'm coming to you today. This is as messed up as I get. So, I laugh and kind of smile because he probably would tell you I'm still messed up and in a fun way. It's like, I've given him a run for his money.
Shows us that we all are a little messed up for sure. Varying degrees of it.
Yeah. I think it was the unknown. We didn't, when you walk through something like that, you don't know. And sometimes people will tell you, society will tell you can't recover. They will say that this haunts you the rest of your life. And so there's a part of, if you ask Andrew or me, we are both, I would say we are walking in so much freedom. And, I love it that Andrew processes differently than I do because he is an engineer. And, where I am more the verbal processor and the writer and journaler, he was very much on, that's something that happened in the past and I'm going to move forward from that. And he really has. He didn't have to do the verbal processing. And even though I tried to help him, even in all that time, he has been so gracious, and he is literally the hands and feet of Jesus for me and my family. He's never said a negative word in 8 years about my ex-husband. He has never, he could say so much, but instead he welcomed my children really as his own, even though they're adult children. He's gracious and kind, and both of us, I would say we both are in a level of healing, but we both kind of had to walk through that. And we walked through it together. So we did. We walked through that together and we did it differently, which is maybe a good example of there's no cookie cutter way to do it.
Wow. Kim, you guys are true heroes of the kingdom. I mean, you guys are fighting with weapons of righteousness. Do not repay evil with evil, but repay it with good. You are embodying that as you live this out. Guys, Kim has this book that she's just released, Healing from Life's Deepest Hurts, Reclaiming Your Life After Grief, Loss, and Trauma. If there's anybody qualified to talk to you about and help you as you're navigating your own journey of grief, loss, and trauma, it's definitely Kimberly Haar. Thank you so much for spending time with us. We're going to put all the links that we have and that we make available to our listeners, to our viewers on the show notes right underneath this YouTube video. Kim, where can we get connected with you? Where can we follow more of what you're doing and the message that you're carrying? Maybe get connected even to therapy. I'm not sure if you've got resources there for people, but how do we follow you?
Sure. You can go to my website, KimberlyHaar.com, and Haar is spelled Haar. I am on all the socials. Well, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. To me, that's all the socials. It is on Instagram, I'm Kimberly.Haar, and on Facebook, I'm Kimberly J. Haar. All my contact information is there. My book's available anywhere books are sold. Therapy, I'm filled with clients on a regular basis. So I have a waiting list. But I'm also licensed in Oklahoma. And so I try to keep everything in Oklahoma.
In Oklahoma. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. This has been such an honor to hear from you and just hear how the Lord is moving and working in your life. So thanks for spending time with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found it as encouraging and insightful as we did. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen, and leave us a rating and review. Your feedback helps us to connect to those who need these stories of hope and healing most, and to reach more listeners just like you. Also, subscribe to our Nothing is Wasted Ministries YouTube channel. Now be sure to stay connected with us on social media. You can follow us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. Follow me at Davey Blackburn. We'd love to interact with you, so be sure to stop by and let us know how these conversations are impacting you and your story. And if you want to learn more about all the incredible resources we have available to help you navigate whatever valley you're walking through, visit our website at nothingiswasted.com. If you're ready to get started in your journey towards healing and finding purpose in your pain, we'd love to help. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/start here for your next step. We want to thank our guests, and we want to thank you, our Nothing is Wasted community, for tuning in regularly. Remember, no matter what challenges you face, whatever pain you are walking through, nothing is wasted. We'll see you next time for another incredible conversation here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But before you go, check out this short clip from our next episode. Thanks for joining us, friends. So that you can come through and you can have just this deep, rich well, and not appreciation is not, but love and delight and the richness of who God is.
Yeah. And I think it's faith building. I think when you see the unique and personal ways in which God enters people's pain, it just builds your faith that, okay, he did that for this person. He did that for this person. He did that for this person. I know he's going to do that for me. And he is. And sometimes it's a matter of being able to see, like we just can't see it because we're in this storm, this cloud, this dark valley. And it just takes time sometimes to see the ways in which he's personally and uniquely showing up in the valley for us. And I think this helps the reader get eyes to see what God's doing in their own life through the stories of what he has done in other people's lives.